Can everybody hear me? Hello. So yeah, thanks for coming to my talk. This is quite a lot of people, but it's a cool venue. So what I'm going to do, first thing I'm going to try and do is stop saying for the first 5 minutes, because I do that a lot. I'm going to talk for the next 50 minutes, or hopefully 45 minutes, and there's time for questions, about what I'm calling organisation, refactoring, and culture hacking, but I couldn't fit organisation on a slide. My name's Andrew Harmel-Law. I'm a tech principal at ThoughtWorks, which apparently, so I'm working in Oslo at the moment, and nobody in Oslo has heard of ThoughtWorks. Apparently, someone said some people in Stockholm have heard of ThoughtWorks. But we're a kind of small, although we're not that small anymore, 25-year-old consulting company, and we've done loads of cool, exciting stuff like, so Cruise Control came out of ThoughtWorks, Selenium came out of ThoughtWorks, a bunch of other stuff came out of ThoughtWorks. And we basically do, hopefully, exciting software consulting. So if you haven't heard of us, then maybe you will be interested in kind of finding out more about us afterwards. It would be very cool if you followed me on Twitter. You don't need to. These days, less and less people use Twitter, but I still do. And I've got the super memorable AL94781 handle, which is my login for my first employer, Sun Microsystems, which rest in peace. Yeah, so that'd be cool. But if you've got questions, it'd be cool if you wanted to ask questions afterwards when there's a microphone and stuff. I'll stop saying That would be cool. Or afterwards is cool, because I don't need to disappear straight away. Or if you want to ask me a question on Twitter or DM me, I'm going to send the slides out and stuff. So if you need to get information, because there's lots of stuff I'm going to go through. So let's go. So this is a quote, because starting a talk with a quote is always good. This is a quote from me on Facebook sometime in 2014. And at the time, I had, up to that point, been a developer and a lead developer, so I'd been like taking requirements and hacking code together, or writing code together to kind of deliver features, and kind of, getting the dopamine hit from merging to master. We're probably a trunk or a branch at that time, because it's 2014. But like merging and shipping and deploying stuff and seeing it work. However, recently when I posted this in 2014, something strange had happened in my career, and I'd ended up spending more time working with human beings as opposed to code to try and make a group of human beings more effective. And it wasn't just like as a dev lead, it was more kind of organizationally and kind of clearing the bureaucracy and things out of the way to make that team more efficient and help them deliver more features and more stuff for the customer we were working for. And it turned out that it was quite good fun, so I put this on Facebook. That's a quote from me, which isn't very exciting. This is a quote from Eli Goldratt. So Eli Goldratt is famous. I don't think he's alive anymore. I say this every time and I always forget to check. I think he's dead, but there is a Twitter account called Goldratt Books, which tweets things that he wrote. He wrote The Goal, which is awesome. You need to read The Goal. There's a list of books at the end of the talk. But The Goal is basically the thing that got rewritten into the Phoenix Project, but it's better written. It's a bit more of a novel. The Phoenix Project's kind of not a great novel, but it's very good as a book about software development. The Goal is actually quite good because you care about the fact that him and his wife are having marital difficulties, so it must be quite good. So this is a quote from him, and it's worth reading out the whole thing because it really made me stop and think when I read it. So it says, features have no value until they are in the hands of a user and being used for productive effort. So that made me think. So the second bit made me think even more. Any activity not spent getting the next most valuable feature into the hands of a user quickly is just waste. So that made me think about all of the stuff that I'd done over quite a long career, because I'm now relatively old. So there's a lot of stuff that, I built good stuff, high quality code, things that we thought would be usable, and useful to customers, but I built it for projects that were waterfall or didn't go live until the very end, or, maybe never went live because the project got killed. Or we built features which we thought were awesome, but we never bothered to check to see if a user needed to use them. So I've watched, when I've released code in various projects in the past, we've deployed it, we've come back the next day to look at the logs to see if anyone's using it. 3 people are using it. And we thought millions of people would use it. So I felt kind of sad. Who is to blame? This must be somebody's fault, and it can't be my fault, because I work for ThoughtWorks. So by definition, I must be good at my job, right? So that goes down better if everyone knows who ThoughtWorks is. But so someone must be to blame. it's not my fault, so therefore who are we going to blame? So we could look, if we look around about where I'm sitting, there's a Scrum Master, they're pretty good to blame because it must be their fault. Or QAs, who every time I write a good feature, the QA says this isn't a good feature, you need to re-implement it because there's defects all over the place. Or the BA, who's basically a failed developer, because most BAs are failed developers. So we could blame them. Other team, that's bad though, because if I blame them, then that's my team and I'm not going to get on with them. I could blame other teams, because that's better, because then they sit in a different part of the office. And so the reason I haven't shipped my feature is because it depends on someone else's feature, and they didn't deliver their feature. That's good, but they're still my peers, so maybe I shouldn't blame them. Maybe I should blame middle management. So this is cross-cultural and cross-industry. There's always middle management. So it's probably their fault. They just get in the way. They're not, they haven't been promoted to like the C-suite, but they've been promoted just enough to get in the way of people trying to do stuff, me. Or you can blame the C-suite, because they're typically so far away from what's actually happening. Like, we know what needs to be done, right? We're there. We said when we were going to build this feature that was the pet feature of the chief executive or the chief executive's partner or something like this. We said it was an invaluable feature, an irrelevant feature, but we were told to do it anyway, so it's their fault. Unfortunately, blaming people doesn't always go well. In fact, it frequently goes badly. So what you typically end up with, maybe you don't end up tied to a stake, or with the scapegoat tied to a stake, with people waving pitchforks and a rake. I'm not sure why they're waving a rake, but people waving stuff, and then, maybe there's flames licking around the feet of this person. That might make everyone in the crowd feel good. They probably haven't solved their problem, right? So this is a picture from Frankenstein. Actually, he's not the monster. It's the guy who created him. He's the monster. So they've just focused all their attention by blaming someone in the wrong place. So then that was like, oh, maybe this whole blaming thing doesn't work. Another picture from a film. We as developers love complaining that all of this stuff around about us is getting in the way and making us fail in the way Goldratt says we fail. We're not the only people who know this. The chief executives and middle management, they're really super aware. They've got the projects that are 3 years behind, or that are, costing more than they ever get back, etc., etc. So they try and change things. What I'm going to argue, slightly polemically for the purposes of this talk, but what I'm going to argue is they come and do change things, and this is how they come and do change, right? So they go up a mountain, something happens to them up the mountain. They probably go to a retreat, right? They've been to a retreat, someone's done a seminar, and they're like, this is amazing, we should do this differently. So they come from the seminar with a list of 3 things, or 70 or 10 things, right? Stop doing this, start doing this. And then they will impose that like this. This is what everyone needs to do. So it'll be big bang, it'll be expensive, it'll just be the same thing for every single part of the organization. It'll be periodic, so maybe you'll wait another 2 years and do another one. I've worked for companies that did it every year, just because. So they're trying to do change, but I would argue they're doing change in a way that doesn't work. Sometimes it does work, that's honest. Very, very infrequently. Usually, it just causes loads of chaos and makes things even worse and even later, and then you go back to kind of how things were. So, is there another way? I did more reading, so I read more books. This is a book called The Fifth Discipline, The Art and Practice of Learning Organizations. So if you ever accidentally speak to someone in your human resources department, they will talk about learning organizations. They're actually really cool, and this book is really cool. It's super thick. So you get a prize if you read the whole book. But it's really good. And so what Sanj did was to write the book, and this is only a tiny piece of it. He did lots of actual study. He went out to lots of organizations and figured out for the high-performing organizations, a bit like Accelerate before Accelerate, what are the things that make these organizations super great? And so he did proper, low-level, in-depth study, not just in IT, across loads of different things. Multinational corporations. And so one of the things he realized was, and that's this quote, placed in the same system, people tend to produce similar results. So we feel this, where if we're in a high-performing team, and this has happened to me, we're awesome, and we're all awesome, and all of our skills are being used to ship good code. So if we're lucky, we've felt this, right? Then one of us gets a better job because we're so awesome. Someone did a talk at a conference and then they got hired by Gradle, which actually happened to someone in my team, which is good. So working for Gradle is good. But so then we're like, oh no, this is a disaster. So this person has left. We are now going to be not as effective because they were this one person and they did all these cool things which we all rely on. We got a new person. It turned out that they weren't the same as the person who left, but they also, because the team was set up to work, it worked really well. I've also worked with similar people or the same people in different systems, in different projects, and nobody can get anything done. And it's not the people, it's the system, it's the kind of surrounding thing that works with them. So that's what he's pointing out. It's the system which has the greatest impact, not the individual skills of the person. Oh. So how do we fix it? That's what this talk is about. This talk is going to give you 5, oh, that's good now, it's catching up. How do we fix it? 5 kind of stories. There's lots of ways to fix this, because I've read a lot of books, as I keep saying. There's a load of books at the end. But I picked out 5 things which were super useful and kind of super powerful to me. And then I can tell you a story about each one so you can kind of relate to it and understand how it worked. And then you can go away and find out loads more information. That's the theory. But fundamentally, they come down to one thing. The fundamental thing is, I think we can do a better job. So I think we, and I was cruel about BA, Scrum Masters / Agile coaches and QAs earlier. By we, I mean people at the ground level, the people who are closest to the problems, closest to the customers, closest to the code, closest to what's there already. We are really well placed to do these changes as opposed to some executive who's been to a retreat in Colorado or maybe somewhere in the north of Sweden. I don't know, that's maybe where Swedish chief executives go, right? But somewhere north with a lot of snow. So we can do a better job. I'm going to say how we can do a better job, and then hopefully I'll explain as I go. Number 1, I think organizational structure is best served by being in a constant state of incremental change. So not every 2 years we change from focusing on certain customer markets to focusing on certain, we reorient everything. We're constantly tweaking and changing and refocusing. That's number 1. Number 2, like I just said, the best place people to do these changes, to drive the changes, are us, the people who are engaged with all of this stuff. And number 3, not only are we best placed to do it, the skills we already have are the skills which we can use to do a good job. So you don't have to go off and learn other stuff and suddenly become post-technical. You can still be technical and use the skills you have as a BA, as a QA, as a developer to do these changes. So now we get to the things. There's 5 things which I'll show you in a slide in a minute. It's supposed to be good practice to tell a story, because if I tell you a story, then you'll relate to the problem and you'll remember what I'm talking about. Most of the stories that you hear at conferences are where you're supposed to imagine yourself as me, so you're kind of imagining yourself as the protagonist or the actor in the story. To kind of think about it differently, and part of this is about thinking differently, what I want you to do is think about being kind of the customer in the story or kind of like the beneficiary. So I'm the person who's going to screw up a lot. You're the person who kind of feels the pain of me screwing up and then feels the benefit when I finally learn the lesson. So here's the stories. Hopefully they've got cool names. It took me a long time to come up with them. Number 1, maps the human architecture. Number 2, read the dynamic system. 3, make the right change. 4, kill consensus, which is the best one. And 5, beyond delegation. So let's go, first one. So map the human architecture. So if we think a little bit for like as our skills, as a consultant, one of the things I get told or asked to do a lot is, there's a new client, which is how I ended up in Oslo. There's a new client, they've got a problem, whatever they think the problem is. What you need to do is go there and understand a gigantic software system or system of systems really quickly and then start fixing the problems around about it. And typically everyone thinks it's a technical problem. Typically it's a human being problem. So how I would do that you don't just land and like say, can you give me access to your GitHub repos and then check out all the repos and then find the topmost repo in the alphabet and then open the first package and the first class and start reading import statements and then package statements and import statements, etc. You don't do that, right? You kind of use your basic concepts of how you would expect a code base to be structured, and then you go, okay, right, cool, this looks like I should read this bit looks, then you can kind of get a good idea and you get a broad view and then you dial in. That's the skill we use for it. But here's a story. So, I think about 4 years ago, I was a lead developer, life was good, I got to build stuff and ship stuff, and occasionally people were happy with it. But then we had some kids, so actually it's quite a bit longer ago. We had 2 children, and I thought I should be responsible, so I should try and get promoted and get paid more money, because this would be good. So I went for a promotion, and because I'm lucky, in inverted commas, which means typically in the UK at least, if you're white and heterosexual and male, you're probably going to get promoted a lot faster. So I got promoted, but something happened that I hadn't anticipated. Typically, up to that point, I just had to be a bit better at my job. This time when I got promoted, someone, my manager, who now works at ThoughtWorks, said, we've decided that we can't just promote you to this next grade without giving you more responsibility. Here is the team you used to be a member of. You're now the manager of this team. So I was now the manager of 36 developers, which was terrifying because I'd spent my entire career trying not to manage or have direct responsibility for anyone's career or anyone's life. I could do it through code. That was good, right? Because we could ship good code. But being responsible for the pay and promotion and career development of people was terrifying. So on a dark train platform in the rain in England, which you can probably imagine, I phoned my wife and said, I am terrified. I've just made a terrible mistake in my career. I've been promoted into a job where I become middle management. I have been given a job I have no idea how to do. Plus, I still needed to be a consultant, so I needed to find the time to look after 36 developers. And we hired more, so when I left, we had 98 directly reporting to me. And she said, that sounds terrifying, but you do this kind of big, you get dropped in the middle of things all the time. What would you do if you were an engineer? Oh, not that. What would you do if you were an engineer? And I was like, okay, right, what kind of skills can I use? So, when we'd had the meeting, where my manager had kind of explained to me what I was now responsible for, he produced a mind map. Then he told me in the space of 3 hours what it meant to do my job. So all of the writing is me panicking in 3 hours. On top of this is the real mind map. I've hidden some names, but it's all true. It's all old as well. Oh, Monica's name didn't get hidden, but Monica was awesome, so that's fine. But so I wrote this, and then I thought, this is what I now need to do on top of my job. This is terrifying. What would you do? If I was a developer, I would try and draw a kind of high-level picture, right? I'd try and get some idea of what my new responsibility looked like to get to grips with it. So what you would do in the past, you'd be told to kind of draw like an org chart, or kind of, maybe people don't, when it gets down to the human, a team, it was me. If I drew an organization chart, it would be me and 36 developers. That doesn't tell me about my job. But there's a thing from another book called Holacracy, the revolutionary something that abolishes hierarchy, which is not true, it doesn't abolish hierarchy. There's a thing called circles and roles. So circles and roles is a bit like a new way of looking at things, but you look at it like an organism. So in an organism you have cells, which is a bit like a role, and then you group cells together and they form organs, and then organs group together and form subsystems of the body, like the digestive system, and then the subsystems of the body group together to form a body. And you see it in lots of different things. So it's not hierarchical, it's kind of just, it combines together. A role is something, it's not associated directly with a human being. So multiple people could do one role, or one person could do multiple roles. And a role has a title, like training approver, we'll come back to that, and a purpose, approve training, and accountabilities, so say yes or no to training approvals, make sure we don't send too many people on training courses, make sure we don't send nobody on a training course. When a role gets too big, you split it up into multiple roles and then you group them together in a circle. And a circle also has a title, accountabilities, a purpose and accountabilities. So you can do things like this. So I did this for this. So to begin with, there was a gigantic circle with everyone in the team, including me in it. And then I owned all of this. And then I just split stuff up. So it ended up looking like this. So everyone is at least in the big circle, which is Java team, but you might also be in other circles. So for example, you can see here, I can use the pointer. You could be in the training circle. That was me, like approving training. There was like a recruitment circle, which is like if you were an interviewer, then you would have to do interviews to help us hire people. If we did demos, we had people who did demos, you know, so you could be a developer plus a demo person plus a recruitment interviewer person. You could have all these things. And what I said to the team was, these are all my responsibilities, but if you want to help, then you can help. So that was good. So suddenly, I still had tons of work to do, but at least I could kind of see what I had to do. There was a lot of stuff. So that was good. So, tips. Things I learned by doing this. Don't overestimate how much you don't understand about how your organization worked. I just thought my boss was busy. I had no idea he was doing all this stuff. So what you do, if you map this out, it's not just a map of what happens, it's a map of power and influence. You know, I had the responsibility for hiring people, so it's kind of a bit of power, which I didn't want, but I had. And I could approve training and things. By sharing it, other people could see what I couldn't see and they couldn't see before. So that started to build trust. One thing is, I could have done this before my boss left. I just didn't care. Now I would care. But you don't need to be in charge. I could have just sat down and said, how does this all work, and map this out. And by doing it, I learned tons, not just about how our team worked, but how our team interacted with other parts of the organization. Because this isn't the whole organization. It was a massive multinational French consulting company, which you can probably figure out the name. I don't know if they're in Scandinavia. I definitely know they're in Oslo. And then what you can see, you can change, right? But we'll get back to changing. At the moment, we're not changing stuff. We're just drawing the big picture. That's story number one. So if we go back to thinking like developers, one thing you would do when you landed on a project, you would go, you know, or you're starting a new piece of work and there's existing code base. You would look at the code to see what was there and which, you know, how it was structured. That's not going to tell you half of the stuff you need to know. To really understand a system, you need to see it running. You need to see it operating and doing things. You know, it's very easy to look at a code base and not spot the bottlenecks, the hotspots in the code, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So reading the dynamic system. So you remember before, next story, I had training approval responsibility. That was one sentence in the 3-hour meeting. You need to approve training. So in my head, this is how it worked. So an email comes in with a training request. I'm the cop. And I would say yes or no. And then I would forward that email to the next step in the chain. So that seemed really simple. Unfortunately, this is what happens. When there was 36 people, and it happened at certain periods of the year, when there was a new training budget, lots of it would happen. And then you hire a lot more people, so you get to 98. You are constantly being asked if you can approve training requests. Not only are there training requests coming in by email, but like sometimes there's a special offer because Pivotal are giving away a spring training course for half price, so I'd need to say to everyone, do you want to do a training course? Also, people would open chat messages to me, or they'd speak to me in the corridor and say, there's a cool training course. So, you know, like for example, there is a blockchain conference on a cruise ship that goes around the Caribbean. It looks awesome. Can I go on it? Which is a true story. So that's, you can tell this is. So that was good. So then I'd have loads of email, and I've got a day job. So I would just batch up the emails, and I'd put them in a special mailbox, and I wouldn't look at them, and then occasionally I'd look at them once a week and reply. Meanwhile, lots of them, this is how I learned to thread email conversations, I'd get more emails saying, have you approved that training request yet? No, I haven't. Back and forth. Or the request was a terrible request, like, I'd love to go on this course, full stop, with no details of how much it costs, when it is, the value of it, etc. So by the time I would look, some of them had expired, so I'd go, yes, I approve that training course, and they would reply, it happened last week. So that was bad. So it was less fun. So what I thought was, because I'd read another book, which we'll see at the end, I'd read a book on trust organizations, and I trusted my colleagues. So I thought what would be really good is, I'm just a bottleneck in the system, and I'm providing little or no value. Why don't I auto-approve all training requests? And I'm a developer, so I didn't do this because I didn't have spare time. I was hoping I could write a rule in Outlook which would auto-forward. So I still had to go in and forward them to the right person. What I wanted to do was write a rule to go, yes, I approve this training request. Awesome. I was happy. For a month, this totally worked. It was really good. Yeah, it was fantastic. And then I had loads of spare time, and I could like focus on my project. Because tons of, again, you know, you look at the picture of jobs I had to do. The biggest job I had to do was approving training requests. It took ages. So it was good. We're not going to talk about the benefits of this because it was a disastrous, terrible idea. We'll move on to the next thing. So number 3, make the right change. So the point of the last one is, and we'll see in a minute why, it is very easy to make a significant impact with a very small change. It's easy to make a bad impact and a good impact. This is why we make the right change. So we've now zoomed out slightly. So it was a lady in finance. This is the finance people who make sure we're spending within our budgets. It was a lady. She wasn't old. But it's quite a cool emoji. So I was auto-forwarding stuff onto the lady. The lady is now getting thousands and thousands, not thousands, lots, hundreds, because I was trying to get people to do training, hundreds of email requests for lots of training things, and she has no idea if Spring is real or made up, because it sounds weird, right? Blockchain, ironically, she knows more about blockchain than I do because she's in finance, so she has a vague understanding of blockchain, but it's on a cruise ship, real story, so there's no way she's going to say yes to a blockchain conference on a cruise ship around the Caribbean. That sounds like a free holiday that we are paying for. And tons of other stuff, domain-driven design. She's like, that sounds technical, but I don't know, is it a real thing or is it not? So she then starts emailing me back to say, this thing, is it real? Because all she had from me was, this is approved, yes. So she's replying to me, my email is now backing up. So I'm getting email from her. I'm also getting loads of queries and follow-ups from all of the developers who've approved things, because she's not approving anything, because she's terrified to approve stuff which she'll get in trouble for. Thousands of queries. So my life becomes horrific. Really bad. So then what I needed to do was think like a developer, but properly think like a developer, not think like someone who's trying to make, because there is 2 different mindsets in a developer. I've done the easiest thing to make my life better, and I've improved the overall situation. Let's try and improve the overall situation. So it turned out, there was a valuable thing that I was providing. There was a reason for me to be there. But if I did it wrong, I would make things worse. So what were the 2 kind of things? It turned out there were 2 kinds of training requests. There were the training requests, which when we hired you, we would say, right, you need to level up in Spring, you need to level up if you're a certain grade in domain-driven design, you need to level up in basic Java. If you want to get Java certified, we'd pay for it. So like standard stuff, yes, auto-approve, I don't care, we know which training provider you go to, yes, yes, yes. That's good, auto-approve. There were other ones, blockchain conference on a cruise ship, which was we didn't get it. I really wanted this person to go on a blockchain conference on a cruise ship, and someone later pointed out to me that we should have paid for this because it would have benefited things massively because all of the super important blockchain people were on that cruise ship. But that needs more effort, right? You can't just automatically forward that. I need to be involved, and I need to spend my time helping with this. So what we ended up with was a 2-stream system. The top one for certain things, and I made it clear to the team what certain things were auto-approved, went through, we had a system of tags, so therefore it would automatically go through. The lady in finance knows these things are automatically coming through because we would say automatically approved, so she knew that it was good. The other stuff, this person wants to do a training course, we go back and forward. I tell them how to write a good training request, but sometimes, you're like, I need to help them think like the people who approve things in management. So we do some back and forth, but few emails. Then we would send it to finance. Usually they'd be happy. Sometimes they have some extra questions, like we're paying in US dollars, so that turns out to be harder because we've now done Brexit, so nobody wants to use our currency anymore, or something like this. So then we go back and forth, but it's far smaller, and then I could focus and things wouldn't time out and stuff. And everyone was happy, so we're still happy. So what are the tips for these 2 things combined? Number 1, see the power of a small change. So my life became spectacularly easier after this. And then it was fun, because then I could say, I want you to go out and find, as a consultancy, we were the product. So this isn't before ThoughtWorks, but same kind of thing. We didn't have a product apart from people. If we had people who knew all the core stuff, but also we had a few blockchain experts who really knew about blockchain, or some people who really knew about data science, or all of these different things, then they felt good. They could stay at the company and grow and become members of those communities. And then it was good for the company because we could say we have these luminaries in this area and this area and this area. So that was good. You've got to make the right change. If you make the wrong change, everyone hates you. The big thing here is, though, Sometimes changes look good, but you need to wait to see what the effect is. And the effect is the whole dynamic system. So you need to look at the impact on the goal. The goal is people in my team having more skills, not me having a small inbox, not the finance lady being happy. It was getting training requests through in a timely fashion so that people could go on training and gain better skills. And if you have the impact on the goal, that's what we're optimizing for. So maybe it might have made my life harder, but if overall it got better, then it was good. The big thing was, the thing I was doing was maintaining quality. So this comes from Toyota's production system. At every single step of the chain, they check the quality of things. I should have been spending more time checking the quality of the requests. So therefore, the people downstream don't need to do their job plus my job. They do their job because I'm doing my job. And watch out for feedback. That's when the emails go backwards. Feedback loops, like we know this in software systems, right? Feedback loops, like back off. Like I've brought down not me. I've worked on projects where things have been in the newspaper because one thing that went wrong backed up, which saturated the CPU and memory of the things upstream, which then backed up and saturated everything and brought the whole site down. We've done this, right? It works in the real world too. It's the same thing. So you've got to watch out for feedback. Number 4, kill consensus. This is the best one because this could really change your life. Everything could change your life. This could really change your life. I was going to write a story for this one, or like not write a story, like come up with a story for my life. But they all revolved around one thing, and it's something that which we probably all have. We probably all have so much of this problem that sometimes we've had to miss a session at this conference, even though we wanted to go to it because you had to dial into it, and it's a meeting. Meetings, we love meetings. I've yet to, maybe there's a culture somewhere in the world which doesn't like meetings. Maybe like in the global south, right? So in like Africa or South America, they don't do meetings and they do something different. Everywhere else loves a nice meeting. So we're going to talk about meetings. So why do we have meetings? We have meetings typically to share information, which isn't bad, but there's other ways to share information. But mainly it's to get agreement, to get a decision and make sure that everyone agrees on this decision. The problem is making a decision the way we do decisions, by consensus, we get everyone who's important, we get them in a room, is super costly because typically there's a lot of people who are important in that decision, and so we have to get them all in a room, and then, you know, you do that thing where you're in a meeting and someone does the maths to figure out how expensive this meeting is because of the cost of, it happens a lot with consultants, because they're like, I'm paying this much money per day for you, and we've had 7 of you sitting in a room for 3 hours, so that's a lot of money. So then you get this. I've been to pre-meeting meetings because we then do more meetings to make sure the meetings are effective, which is like insanity, right? So don't do that. So what if we think like a developer? If we think like a developer, so this, I've avoided having to do this in my life. This is a diagram from the internet of a Kafka, I think it's Kafka, re-electing its leader based on top of a zookeeper cluster, right? Which is just terrifying. That's horrific. So if too much of your system depends on this, then you're in trouble. So what we do in software, so therefore it's consensus. So there are some things we need consensus on. Like if you've got a cluster, you need to know who's the master. But we engineer systems to have as little consensus as possible so as many things can be autonomous. Microservices let you have autonomous teams, right? And let you have autonomous deployments. Loads of the stuff we do in the technical world is so that we can be efficient and not block and wait for things, right? Because then we have this sometimes, but we've got it very small and we watch it very carefully and we make sure it doesn't break. And we put, we put it in a special place in AWS, and we make sure that we protect the pipeline so nobody can accidentally push a breaking change and all this kind of stuff. We don't do this in the real world. And the reason is because we have no idea, because this blew my mind when I heard about it. I thought meetings were the only way to get consensus or be chaotic. So you can have meetings or just let everyone do what they want. That's bad too. There's another way, and it's called the advice process. So the advice process, there's lots of stuff about it. If you Google it, it's in a book called Reinventing Organizations, which is also the end of the talk. But there's a wiki for reinventing organizations. The advice process is not just used by software engineers. I think there's no software engineer examples in the book. The advice process, the examples in the book are, there's a Pakistani nuclear energy company. they use this, right? So when you find out about it, maybe you're a bit scared, but it works because they're doing nuclear energy. There's a nursing company in Holland that uses this, so like looking after people's lives, that's important. You hope it works. So there's lots of stuff that uses it, and it's very simple. This is the process. Anyone can make any decision. So that sounds like chaos, but there's 2 extra bits. So if you make a decision, you first need to seek advice from everyone who will be meaningfully affected. So therefore, you need to understand, maybe with circles and roles or something, you need an understanding of the people in, will finance be affected? Bits that you don't care about. You need to know, are you deciding to use a product which is expensive? I don't pay for it. I'm a developer. I don't care. But someone's going to care, and they're going to say no. So everyone who will be meaningfully affected, and those with expertise. So maybe there's someone who won't be affected, but they did this 7 years ago in COBOL, longer than 7 years ago. Right? So we don't talk to them, but it turns out, like clustering or high availability computing or, virtualization and all of these different things, it is not new. We've just got new buzzwords for it. There will be people who will say, you need to really worry about this because it will cause complete chaos. Those are the people with expertise. So the clever thing here is, you've got a process where people can do things and take decisions, and there's a little bit we can talk about in a minute to make those decisions clear and transparent. But you don't wait. You're going to all of these people, but you can go to them individually, get all the input, but then you get someone who needs the change, who needs a decision. They are the person making the decision. They own the responsibility. Because if you get consensus in a meeting, it's very frequent where everyone afterwards will go, well, it wasn't my thing, the meeting decided. And nobody owns the decision. Now, someone, the reason you don't get chaos is because I made it and everyone knows I made it. So it's like one thing in the nuclear company, someone decides to open an entire set of power plants in another country. So their manager said, go and you make the decision. And they did. So they went to this new country and all this stuff. Tips. No one is ever going to say, if you go back to your company tomorrow and say, this crazy person from ThoughtWorks said we should do the advice process for everything, they will laugh in your face and it will not happen. But you can try it with something like architectural decision records. So it's a good structure. It's a way, when you're making an architectural decision, in the old days we wrote gigantic design documents. Now we try and write, this is an individual decision, so we capture the context of the decision, et cetera, et cetera. If you use this to document the process, then you can say, we spoke to these people, they gave us this feedback. We ignored it, but we record that this person who does things in the COBOL days said this. The reason we're ignoring them is because this has now changed. It used to be expensive, now it's cheap. Or there was a defect in Mongo 2, which meant that it couldn't, it would lose data, and now it's fixed. So it's good. Therefore, you get better decisions because I'm responsible. And you get more ownership because if I'm responsible, I'm really going to pay attention to making a good decision as opposed to blaming everyone else. And it'll be faster, and you'll get transparency. So that's the tips. So the last one is beyond delegation. So you're possibly thinking, up to this point, everything apart from maybe the last one sounds like refactoring. So it sounds like, if we think about refactoring in software, it's where you proceed carefully, you make sure you've kind of got tests, or you make sure you've got awareness of what's already there, and then you make one change, and then you step back and see if it works. Where's the culture hacking, right? Because hacking sounds more exciting. It's what we do for fun. And it might be like, make an order of magnitude improvement. Beyond delegation is a lens that we're going to look at the things we've just covered, the 4 things. We're going to look back at each of those through a new lens. And the lens is beyond delegation. So to do that, we need to look at what culture is. So culture, I've written talks before where if you need a definition of something, you Google it and you cut and paste the definition from Google into a slide, and you're done. The definition of culture is hard. And eventually, another book, The Toyota Way, they quote Edgar Schein. And so The Toyota Way is worth reading again because lean people love it, so we don't love it because the lean thing ended up in like consultancy land, and it's all like lean transformation consultants. There is tons of good stuff in this book, and it all got forgotten, and it's about human beings. There's a big pyramid that they draw a picture of in The Toyota Way, and at the center of the pyramid is human beings. I've been on a lot of lean training stuff, and the human beings bit kind of disappeared. Kanban and on chords and stuff gets talked about. Human beings don't get talked about. But so Edgar Schein and the folks in Toyota Way thought this was important. So he said, culture is the pattern of basic assumptions a given group has to cope with its problems. So typically its problems are the organization and the bureaucracy and just how things are. So that's how it works. How you cope with how it works is your culture. So you might have a culture of kind of JFDI or just do it, right? Or you might have a culture of a sense of humor. A lot of British companies have this, especially in the last 3 years. Where we know it's going to be a disaster, but we laugh about it and make jokes about it, which is why the British people think they have a good sense of humor, because we don't try and fix it, but at least we don't get depressed because we've had a good laugh. Right? That's culture. And it happens in companies as well. And so with that in mind, let's go to the next slide. So, beyond delegation brings us back to the first 3 statements at the start. And there's a kind of flip side to statement number 2. So statement number 2 was we, the people at the front line, the people doing the doing, we are the best people to do it. What you might have wondered is, where does that leave the people who are higher up? You know, the people with more responsibility, the managers and things. This is where it leaves them. So if we're wanting people, you know, closer to the action to do things, they need to help us by making transparent as many processes as possible and opening up as much data. So like it turns out, I was never allowed to open up salary information, but I managed to open up the salary banding at my company and the criteria by which we would decide whether or not you were going to get a pay rise and how much. So therefore, people got a lot more control, right? And then they could go, oh, okay, we could fix this thing. So opening up information, or like how much things cost. Developers don't know how much stuff costs, but making this available, then they can see it. And then getting out of the way, so trusting us to improve things, and maybe mentoring us. So there's a recent paper from Google, and I think Ishel, who's talking here, I don't know if she's talking about this, she talks about this paper. So it's like managers don't disappear, but they stop managing and they start nurturing and building people's careers and building their decision-making skills and giving them context and things. That's what they say at Netflix. A manager's job is to give context, so the decision can be made better by the person who's close to it. But you might not know about this new feature that someone in Netflix is building, so they give you that information and then you go and speak to them. So it's about power. It's obviously about power, because power is in one place, and I said before with circles and roles, it's kind of maybe it's in the wrong place, you put it in the right place. I also talked about the fact that I got promoted and I was terrified about the fact I would be a blocker, I would make bad decisions, I would either be ignoring the training requests and doing my job, or doing training requests and not doing my job. What people tell you to do to get around that situation, because nobody likes doing this, right? I bet lots of people who haven't been in middle management think it looks like a bit of an easy job. It's a nightmare. What they tell you to do is delegate, but delegation sucks. Delegation is like me taking the training approval problem and giving it to James, because I know James is in the audience. I give James the problem, so now James has to approve training requests. I haven't given James the power to fix the problem. I've just given James the problem. So now I've made my life better, but the system is still the same. It's just someone else, another kind of actor in the system is doing it, but it's still James's problem. Delegation is not, you hear about it tons. When you get promoted, you get to read books, which tell you how to delegate better. You go to conferences, which tell you how to delegate better. It still sucks, because you're not making it better, you're just spreading the problem out. What you need to do is devolution. So I come from Scotland, where we may or may not think this is a solution to some of our current problems. But devolution is where you give the power and the problem. So you'll see in Scotland at the moment, they're asking for like increased powers to be able to not just kind of distribute the money, but to raise taxes so they can have control of the money, so they can say where it goes. So it beats delegation. So if we think about this, if we think about devolving power and kind of making that cultural change, opening up information and trusting people, where does it leave us? So if we revisit the things we just looked at, what happens? So then we get advice process plus. So power will initially be held by managers, leaders, right? So today, it is where it is in your company. But if you role model it, so if instead of making executive decisions, if you have some power, you say, I'm going to follow the advice process, I will show you me following the advice process, then you can start, even if nobody's doing it, it's still you, they can see what's happening. And it's a safe way to transfer power. So then you can say, right, now I'll mentor you. I would like you to make this decision, but I can give you loads of tips and help you, tell you who to speak to, tell you the questions to ask, etc., etc. So suddenly you get the advice process plus. because you need to build people's confidence. People are scared to take on responsibility unless they get accidentally promoted. Next one is write changes in end-to-end dynamic systems. What you need to do to make this work is make the whole system visible. I was amazed at how many people don't know about the whole system. So in the training request thing, it was all the way to someone getting training. To do that, you need to teach people to read systems. 5 minutes left. There's a book about that, which I'll tell you about in a minute. If you combine it with the advice process, then you get to what's called Kaizen, and which lean people like. But Kaizen is not gigantic big improvements. Kaizen is tiny, tiny little improvements. So Kaizen, for example, is if I'm adding a widget to a dashboard in a car in a Toyota plant, if I reconfigure my desk so it's this much closer, so I have to travel slightly less distance between the car and where the widgets live, I've made a small improvement on the overall project. If I've moved the desk closer to me and further away from my colleague who uses things in the other bin, I've not improved the process. I've just optimized my piece and not their piece. So you need to get to this thing. And then the last one, circles and roles. So the first thing you do to kind of start spreading out circles and roles after you've made it public is you invite co-owners. So when you go on holiday, you say, my job is these roles, and while I'm away, training approvals role is going to be filled in by James. Approval for hiring people is going to be filled in by all these people. So you're not saying it's me that's on holiday, it's the person doing these roles is on holiday, and then you can slowly give them away. So I hated working with salespeople. Some people love working with salespeople. Actually, now I don't mind working with salespeople, but it used to be a nightmare. People came to me and went, oh, this is cool. You have this whole responsibility for working with salespeople. We want to work with salespeople because we want better work, and they keep selling work which is like boring COBOL mainframe or like SAP integration. We can do cooler stuff because we did a blockchain course. Help us do this thing. And then you can let people change things, right? Then they can change stuff, and you encourage people to do it, and you can use the advice process and everything to do it. So then we get to the thing. Then we ask the question, is it a refactoring or a hack? It kind of doesn't matter, right? If you're generally improving things and you're improving the end-to-end system, then that's what you're aiming for. So I said there was books. I've arranged them by section. So I've kind of mentioned some of them already, but not all of them. So the first one, Map the Human Architecture, the roles and circles things in holacracy, which is a bit like Scrum gone out of control at an organizational level, but there's loads of awesome stuff in it. And it's based on sociocracy, which you can Google. The next two, if you want to learn about thinking in systems, Donella Meadows has died sometime in the past, but that book will blow your mind. It goes from like dripping taps and thermostats all the way to global warming and the collapse of Western civilization due to the capitalism running out of control. The Goal is awesome, which kind of is a story based on systems thinking. Fifth Discipline takes that and does things with it, and Toyota Way is a case study of how Toyota use this. And then Killing Consensus and Beyond Delegation. Reinventing organization, if you get past the first few chapters, which is a bit like someone's been on a yoga course, and now doesn't care about anything apart from the kind of the vibrations of the universe, it will blow your mind, but you've got to get past the first bit. The opposite of that, but which is very similar, is Turn the Ship Around. That is about someone getting promoted to looking after a nuclear submarine in the US Navy. It was the worst performing submarine, and he did lots of these things on a nuclear sub within the US Navy, which is super hierarchical, and everyone loved it. So if you think you can't do it, if you can do it on a nuclear submarine, then you can do this stuff. So I lied a little bit at the start. I didn't lie. Number one, I deleted my account on Facebook, but if I was posting now, I would say it is as much fun. Doing this stuff, like seeing the benefit, the dopamine hit you get from making a concrete improvement in stuff is as good as like seeing your feature running in production. For me, maybe not for everyone. Maybe some people just love seeing you like their Kotlin code running. But if you can get this stuff going and like really see the improvements, and then you can see other people, then you can step back and other people are doing it, it's fantastic. So I'd encourage you to do it. Does anyone, I don't know how much time I've got left. I've got 1 minute left. 1 minute. Does anyone have a 1 minute question? Or I'll still here. Hello, yes.
When you got promoted to be a manager, did you still work as a developer at the same time?
Yeah. So that was the big problem. That's why I was terrified on the train platform. I still had to bill. I went and asked for 1 day off a week, but I still had to bill to clients. So like if you're paying me, if you're my client, right, and it looks like I'm approving training requests, you're not happy. So plan A was approve them in the evening. That sucked because I was a dad. Like I had to come, be a father and be present at home. So that didn't work. And I couldn't fit it all into 1 day. So what I had to do is kind of change the fact that it happened in the first place.
So how did you organize your time? Did you split up like, now I do 2 hours as whatever manager task, or now I do 6 hours development a day, or do you have like dedicated days a week?
Dedicated days. Yeah, because you can't, context swapping is bad. And then giving away as much responsibility and power as possible to other people. And there was a lot of work to kind of nurture them and teach them what I'd had to learn, but it was amazing. And then it became better. So then I used to say I didn't lead the team led itself. I just made sure that the team had the things to do what it needed to do. But if anyone else has any other questions, we need to stop. I'll be waiting down here for a bit if anyone wants to have a chat. That'd be really cool. But thanks for listening.